Hello, my name is Seth Tanner, and I would like to thank you for joining me today in this short lecture we're going to have about the Space Shuttle Challenger, that accident that took place in 1986. It's one of the worst accidents that NASA has experienced and that we have, as a nation, have experienced in our endeavors to travel in and explore space. I'm going to be talking about three different questions today that we're going to address. So we'll jump right into it. The first question is, what could NASA have done differently to prevent this tragedy? And so I guess for those of you who don't know, the Space Shuttle Challenger was a launch that, like I said, that took place in 1986. It was a big deal. It was anticipated greatly in the media. There was a teacher on board, Miss McAuliffe, who was going to be doing a broadcast for students all across the country in space. So it was a big, exciting thing in the media, and when it took off, it exploded, and all 7 astronauts were killed, and it was a horrible, including that teacher, obviously, and it was a horrible tragedy. So to answer that question of what NASA could have done differently, we need to first understand what exactly went wrong. There were a lot of different things that went wrong, but NASA's research and accident report basically boiled down to was it was a problem in the O-ring with the O-rings. The O-rings are like a rubber gasket that was used in the boosters, the rocket boosters, and those failed due to the cold temperature on the morning of the launch that caused the rubber to corrode and fail, and caused the fuel to leak, and caused an explosion that destroyed the entire space shuttle and the vehicle, and killing all on board. So what they could have done differently is the engineers, those rocket boosters were created by a company called Thiokol, which is actually right here in Utah. They were based in Ogden, Utah, which is where I'm sitting right now. And the scientists there had discovered, they'd noticed problems with this on previous launches in 1985, and they had noticed that the O-rings were deteriorating because of the cold weather. And so that was something they were concerned about leading up to this launch. One of the prominent engineers, and this leads us to our second questions, is about Roger Bouchelet. Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm saying his name correctly, but his engineer and another one, Arnold Thompson, were two of Thiokol's most knowledgeable and prestigious engineers. Then now Roger Bouchelet, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, was approaching retirement age, and he knew that this was going to be a problem. He brought this problem up to NASA because they had forecast that it was going to be very cold that day, like 18 degrees. And his research showed that these O-rings were only rated to 53 degrees. And he brought this up, but when Thiokol brought this up to NASA, they didn't want to hear it. Were under a lot of pressure, a lot of media pressure. The previous launch in 1985 had been delayed 7 times, and it had been an embarrassment for them. The press was calling them out on it and embarrassing them. So this time they wanted to go. They had also, as I mentioned, this teacher was scheduled to broadcast from space on the 4th day of the mission, which was a Friday. So if it was bumped even one day, that broadcast would take place on a Saturday, and there are no kids in school on Saturday. So NASA basically ignored him and pushed it through. And so the question I want to ask from an ethical standpoint is if those engineers should have done something more. But based on my research, from what I read in this handout and documentaries I watched on the subject, they really did all that they could within their power without, resigning. They told their bosses that they weren't comfortable with it, that they wouldn't sign off on it. But Thiokol, eventually the director of that department signed off on it, and NASA went ahead with it anyway. So I think that they did really the best that they could, short of resigning. The last question I want to address is what I can do as a student and learn from this in my professional future. I'm going to school to be a pilot, and I just will learn that, have learned that safety is always paramount, and that regulations and safety are paramount. And as a passenger pilot, the convenience of passengers and getting their money's worth is safety is more important, and I will always prioritize that. Thank you for joining with me joining me today. I know it was a short presentation, but if you are interested in learning more, I encourage you to Google it. There's some great documentaries out there, great documentation. It was truly a tragic story and one that could have been prevented, but we learned quite a bit from it. So thank you.